Are we ready to go live? Yep, we're live. Thank you. Well, good morning, everyone, both in the room and outside of the room. I would like to begin by welcoming those members of the public and press who have joined us here today in Huntingdon, or also those who are joining the meeting or following along on our live stream. The Combined Authority allows filming and photography in its public meetings, so please feel free to take pictures and use social media during the meeting. Can I ask, though, that, and I know I've said this already, but I'm just doing one final check. And of course, I've said it so many times, it's likely to be my phone that goes off, isn't it? But can I ask that everyone turns their mobile phones to silent or vibrate whilst the meeting is taking place? There are no file dues scheduled for today, so if the alarm sounds, I will adjourn the meeting. We will all move to the muster point, which is in the High Street. And Councillor Davenport-Ray, I know, will be able to lead the way to that muster point for us. I would remind members and officers that the meeting will be recorded. My name is Anna Smith. I am the representative for Cambridge City and lead member for Transport, and I will be chairing this meeting today. So our first item on the agenda is announcements, apologies for absence, and declarations of interest. I would like to start by extending a warm welcome to the new Peterborough member on the committee, Councillor Gavin Elsey. Councillor Elsey, welcome. Apologies, would the governance manager let us know of any apologies?
Thank you, Chair. We've had apologies from Councillor Wakeford, and we have Councillor Davenport-Ray in attendance on his behalf.
Thank you. And does any member wish to declare a disclosable pecuniary interest or non-statutory disclosable interest on any item being considered today? And a reminder that declarations of interest can be made at any point during the meeting. So whilst I do not normally encourage anyone to interrupt the chair, if you do think of an item, something you need to disclose, please just come in there so we can get that noted as soon as possible. So moving then on to item 2, which is the minutes and action log. You will find the minutes in front of you. I'm just making sure that I have those in front of me too. They're here. Are there any comments on those minutes? I have one, which is simply to note the contents of these minutes. There are some issues of what was and was not discussed and tabled in the last TIC meeting, I believe were raised at a recent meeting of Peterborough City Council. I will be dropping a note to Mayor Nick Sanford to ask that some aspects of the record can be clarified or corrected in terms of some of the things that were raised by some members at that last meeting. So just to be clear on that. Okay, well, I see no objections to the minutes, so we will take the minutes as approved and the action log as noted. I'm just going to sign those and date it. I do sometimes feel extremely sorry for anyone that's got to work out my signature there, but there we are. That is indeed mine. We're now moving on to public questions. We have received 4 questions for the meeting today, all of which have been published on the website and circulated to members. The first 3 questions will be read out by the governance manager and I will give a response which will later be published on the website. The 4th question is from Mr. Wood from the Cambridge Area Bus User Group and he is here in person to answer his question. So Mr. Wood, when it's time, I'll invite you down here to the table so that you're able to use the microphone. Joe, please can we have the first question?
Thank you, Chair. There's lots of road numbers in this question, so forgive me if I stumble a bit over it. This question is from Clive Freeman, Chair of Bramley Line Heritage Railway Trust, that's BLHR. This question is, the BLHR over the years has been in contact with various members of the CPCA and National Rail regarding the use of and the reopening of the Wisbeach March rail length as a heritage line to promote tourism in the area. The BLHR thoughts on running a heritage railway would be to have a station in the Redmore Lane area with either an entrance to the station on the westbound side of the A47. This would allow for a clockwise circular bus route into Wisbeach, via B198 and back along A1101 onto the A47 via Elm Hall roundabout and left into the station. The bus would not have to cross the A47 traffic to exit or enter the station. The alternative would be to turn into Redmore Lane from the A47 B198 and Redmore Lane roundabout. This still allows for a clockwise circular bus route around Wisbech. Then run the train on the current single line trackbed to March with a yard at Waddlesea and a station at Coldham. At the 20-foot river crossing, put a stop on the Coldham side of the B1101 or repair the 2314 bridge crossing over the 20-foot river, then continue to March crossing the B1101 Elm Road and enter March station via Whitemore Junction. BLHR believed there would be various options as to where the train could enter the station. All of this will be subject of discussion with interested parties and availability of land to the BLHR if CPCA and National Rail decide they are not going for a commuter route. In Coventry, they have a very light rail project, which suggested a build cost in 2019 of £7 million per kilometre. They said this in comparison to between 35 and 60 million for traditional tram systems. On their website, it now suggests £10 million per kilometre for the VLRP. So based on that, the Wisbech March link would be well in excess of 100 million for that system because of the A47 issue, getting into Wisbech for a new station, access to March station and the 20-foot river bridge repair. The other option BLHR has thought might be a solution to both aspects of rail transport is to run VLLR and heavy rails side by side as the route was originally built with two lines. As stated by Rail Future East Anglia's Paul Hollinghurst in the September 2023 meeting, there have been previous surveys and reports done over the years with no decision made on the line. With the King's speech not specifically saying HS2 money would be reallocated to other rail projects after it was hinted at in the PM's office relief on the 4th of October 2023, and national rail funding being set for the next period, 2024 to 2029, as BLHR understands it. Therefore, no change at Ely North Junction for at least 5 years, and therefore not having a start date on the Wisbech March rail line till after this. BLHR would like to therefore ask, will the CPCA and National Rail give permission for the BLHR to have a lease to run and develop a heritage railway between Wisbech and March to benefit tourism in the area and pass on the history and heritage legacy of the railway in the area because of how it affected so many people's lives?
Thank you. And thank you for your question. I've been a little bit generous on allowing that to run over the 2 minutes because, of course, you're not here. You can't have a follow up. So we welcome and appreciate the public interest shown in the reopening of the Wisbech to March railway line. And in fact, there is an update on this topic on today's TIC agenda, which will hopefully provide some clarity on where we are currently. And I know we're looking forward to welcoming Network Rail to answer our questions directly on that. The Combined Authority recognises that the reopening of the line could provide a positive impact on many areas of life for our communities and is committed to working with Network Rail and other stakeholders to assess its viability. As part of this work, Network Rail are considering opportunities to introduce a shuttle passenger service between March and Wisbech in Cambridgeshire to improve connectivity and access to the commuting market nearby to support job opportunities and the economic regeneration of the area. The objective of these enhancements is to facilitate the project output of a balanced modal appraisal of all rail options to allow a passenger service between March and Wisbech based potentially on a shuttle service. Network Rail is currently undertaking a study into the feasibility of reopening the Wisbech to March line, and in line with previous TIC recommendations, we have engaged Network Rail to undertake an options assessment report to consider all on-rail modal options, considering 4 possible options. These are conventional rail, tram train, light rail, and very light rail. And that study will be finalised and returned to the CPCA by the spring of 2024. As well as the Network Rail study, the CPCA have had initial exploratory conversations around alternatives to rail options to include autonomous vehicles. Whatever the proposed solution is, it should offer value to the local communities and to the taxpayer. More than happy, if you would like Mr. Freeman to have a meeting with you to discuss this further. Thank you. So now I think we are going on to question 2 from Peter Wakefield, who is Vice Chair of Rail Future East Anglia.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, question 2. At the Transport and Infrastructure Committee meeting on 15th of March 2023, in response to a public question, it was stated that the combined authority is working with Network Rail around the appraisal of options for the link between Wisbech and March, and a further report will be provided to the committee in summer 2023. This was later delayed to the September TIC meeting, then to the November TIC meeting, and it is now reported that this will be available by the 31st of March 2024. There also appears to be no reported progress on the alternatives to rail options which the CPCA are looking at. This further delay is very frustrating to those of us who have been campaigning for the railway reopening for the past 10 years. What confidence do you have that the National Rail Report will be available for the new date, which is 9 months later than the original plan of summer 2023? Also, can the committee give some information about the alternative to rail options, which again seems to be running substantially late?
Thank you. And Mr. Wakefield, clearly great minds think alike, because it's the second question we've had on Wisbech today. My answer actually would be broadly the same. I'm not proposing to repeat that answer in full, but just again to flag up the fact that we do have Network Rail coming later to this meeting. We're really, really looking forward to hearing what they have to say. And I know the committee, and particularly some members of the committee, are going to have a lot of questions they want to ask. So again, we spoke briefly a couple of weeks ago. Again, very happy to continue the conversation in this outside of the committee. Question 3, please.
Question 3 is from Paul Hollinghurst, resident of Cambridge, working in Camborne. The government's Rural Mobility Fund Evaluation interim report has just been published, and the information paints a bleak picture of DRT. Roger French, OBE, former managing director of Brighton and Hove Buses, who travels widely and has sampled many DRT operations, summarises with the damning, whichever way you cut the data and try and dress it up as DRT, reaching parts of rural communities conventional buses just can't reach. These results confirm what we have been saying on here for the last 4 years. It's an absolute hopeless cause and a scandalous waste of public money. This seems to be a good assessment for Ting, which is stated as costing £42 per passenger. Now the CPCA appears to be planning to spend BSIP plus funding on more such services, with a total of £900,000 on Fenland, East Cambridgeshire and South Cambridgeshire DRT trials. There is an alternative to DRT which seems to hold much more promise: semi-flexible services. These are where each service has at least one fixed departure or arrival time, but can vary its route beyond this in response to bookings. This is a big advantage of adding certainty that it will operate at specified times, and these times can be chosen by the operating authority to match things like getting people to work or education in a particular town, as opposed to DRT, where someone's important journey to work can be made impossible by someone else pre-booking a conflicting leisure journey. This type of service can be used, for example, to provide a predictable connection to a railway station or service to a hospital at a predictable time each day, unlike DRT, which is driven by random and therefore conflicting user bookings. Examples of semi-flexible services are Wiltshire Connect 101, serving the rural area around Devizes, successfully for over 20 years, Booker Bus 99, serving the area around Chichester, and G2 Gate, serving Dedworth. Has the CPCA assessed how a semi-flexible service would compare to DRT? If not, then this should be done before a further £900,000 is wasted on DRT at a time when conventional timetable bus routes are struggling through lack of funding, even though they carry many times the number of passengers DRT will ever achieve.
And thank you, Mr. Hollinghurst, for that. So, as many of you will know, I'm a teacher and by background, and the thing you focus on when you're a teacher is looking at what the objective is, and then you work back to decide how you will best meet that objective. And I think what I'd want to underline here is that the Combined Authority remain absolutely committed to ensuring that the option that is chosen for various areas is the one that is most likely to meet the objective. So, several studies have detailed a number of potential benefits from the use of demand responsive transport. So, it can offer a flexible and adaptive passenger transport service that can adjust to changing needs. And we've had some extremely positive feedback from users of the Ting trial. Now, some of the positive benefits include flexibility, convenience, accessibility, cost efficiency. We've seen benefits around reductions of congestion emissions. There are issues around tailored services. There's all sorts of things. I could go on. There are all sorts of potential benefits of a service. So we do absolutely maintain an openness to the prospective expansion and adoption of further DRT services in the future. But that needs obviously to be an evidence-led approach, which is what officers are very much spearheading. And the pilots for this still require some shaping and development. And it is distinctly possible, therefore, that we may in the future look at exactly the kind of options you suggest around a semi-flexible service in addition to continuation of a fully demand responsive one. But obviously, further work is undertaken, is needed to assess learning so far and to keep then reflecting and setting our priorities for the future. So basically, it's not a yes and it's not a no. But the key point here is that we will continue to consider all options that may give very best value in all its interpretations of the word for our community and for the combined authority. But thank you for your question. Now, I believe our next question is from Richard Wood, who is here. So, Richard, please do come down to the microphone. You have to press the middle button, and then the key is to make sure you turn it off as well when you're done. You won't be able to turn it on because mine's still on.
Thank you very much, Chair. My question is with reference to agenda item 7, 2.15 bus stop infrastructure programme, 2.17 bus stop audit. These are very welcome actions, much overdue, I might say. Now, that's the good news. The bad news is that so much of our bus stop infrastructure is seriously deficient. Operators have changed to low-floor accessible buses throughout the region. Legislation has pushed that, obviously, but many have been proactive on this. But whilst, for example, the latest electric buses that both Whippet and Stagecoach have introduced have space for 2 reference wheelchairs of 1.2 metres, they're inaccessible to passengers using mobility aids if the infrastructure is deficient. Now, there's a couple of Cambridge city stops. I'm not talking rural stops here, they're probably even worse, that are accessed via Grass Verge, and members will see the full NatTan stop reference in my question. Elland Way, Gazelle Way, Cherry Hinton, a relatively new development, disconnected from the footway by 10 metres of a sloping grass verge. Whittle Avenue on Addenbrooks Road, Trumpington, a very new development. Where no bus stop infrastructure was installed, so the operator have put a bus stop flag on a lighting column on a grass verge, which is separated from the nearby residential development by decorative planting and a cycle lane. Elsewhere, defective bus stop islands have been constructed between a continuous cycleway and the carriageway. Now, an island with less than 2.5 metres of width cannot accommodate a reference wheelchair of 1.2 metres and the wheelchair ramp of 1.2 metres, which the driver would extend from the bus. 2 examples. Blinko Grove outbound on Hills Road, part of the Purbeck Road to Addenbrooks remodelling, has an inadequate island of 1.9 metres width. It also has real-time passenger information, which is downstream, away from the direction of the approaching bus, facing downstream. So if you're in a wheelchair, you can't even look to see when the next bus is coming. And it's pretty tricky for anybody who's able-bodied. Union Lane inbound, and here this is one that has been installed by the Greater Cambridge Partnership just recently. This is seriously deficient. It's an inadequate island of 1.9 metres width and a number of other suboptimal features. Now, my question is, in the light of the examples cited, will the Transport and Infrastructure Committee commit to addressing the issues raised in our position paper, which was done jointly with Living Streets Group of Cambridge, and recently sent to key stakeholders, by specifying bus stop design parameters, monitoring new installations, and developing a guidance manual. And in the interim, before you can do all that work yourself, adopt Transport for London's accessible bus stop design guidance as a default, so that any new stops committed must be to those parameters or give you very, very good reasons why that is not possible. Thank you.
Thank you. And whilst I do at most points try to be entirely paper free, I am very grateful for the paper copy of the Citing and Design Guide. And I know this will be appended, I'm sure, to the public question. And as ever, I want to thank you and your organisation, the organisations you work with, for the really positive way that you always engage with the myriad of authorities which are dealing with different aspects of transport across our region. So thank you for that, and thank you for coming. And I think it's fair to say, and we both know this, that the CPCA has inherited a bus stop network which has, to be frank, not been maintained or improved for a number of years. The items you mention are part of a wider, but I have to say at the moment, unquantified problem. And therefore, one of the things we have done is instituted an authority-wide audit of bus stops, of which we estimate there are nearly 3,000. So it's going to take some time to get through that. The examples raised in this question of recent installations, and that I think demonstrates the scale of the job that we have, and potentially the cost that this project is going to entail. The audit will include accurate GPS location, listing of facilities, photographs of stops and locations, because it's only through carrying out a really quite extensive audit, I think, at this stage, that we're going to be able to prepare a budget that will provide a lasting and systematic upgrade to meet DDA and other accessibility requirements. And I'm particularly grateful that you've brought up some of those equalities issues. And I can hear Councillor Bird in my ear at the moment from the City Council, because she always raises these equalities issues, and I know she'll be incredibly pleased that you're also raising them too. So budgets are being currently worked through, staff recruited, vehicles leased to address the issues, and we're in contact with the County Council as well over the access to some of the small parcels of land involved as well. So this is a large-scale programme, and I do need to manage expectations that this potentially could take a long time to carry through, and that the order in which upgrades will then be carried out will need to rely on the data brought from that audit. So absolutely committed to those high standards. What I don't want to do today is promise that, it's all going to be there by next May. I think the advice I've discussed with officers the issue of the Transport for London guidelines, and they're clearly incredibly high standards, and we need to look at those carefully. I think the only caveat I'm hearing from officers that we need to ensure that they work within some of the geography of somewhere where the stops are, and so that would be the only caveat there. I think that's something we need to explore really carefully. We'll absolutely be investigating best practice. People of Cambridgeshire and Peterborough deserve a good infrastructure, and we have a significant commitment to bus reform. As you know, quite a lot of this meeting will be about discussing that. Bus infrastructure has to be part of that. So thank you very much for bringing your question. And do you have a follow-up?
Yes, thank you, Chair. What I would say as a follow-up is that this combined authority is somewhat different to some of the other combined authorities who actually took over the transport responsibilities that it inherited from the former metropolitan councils. Now, the metropolitan councils had been dissolved a number of political decisions one way and the other, but the boroughs retained a joint transport authority who had an overview. There were limited powers over operating and so on, but they could at least make sure the bus stops were of a decent standard, that the bus stops had a timetable case, that they all showed where this stop was and where the buses were going to. Now, what we need here, and I take your point, Chair, about the overlapping authorities, and many people will be unfortunately familiar with the Venn diagram which was drawn up by Edward Lee when Smarter Cambridge Transport was running. But if I might explain to other members of the committee, it appears to me that the actual hard standing for a bus stop is county highway responsibility. A bus stop shelter would
Just to
be
say,
the
you've
lower
only got
tier
probably about
authority.
30 to 40 seconds left,
Okay.
so be aware.
Now, what I really need to do is have some authority, some person within this transport authority who is it. I don't like to use words like czar, it's a bit silly, but will get a grip on the whole situation as you get the audit completed.
So absolutely, and just doing a quick double check there with the officers. Yes, there is an intention to make sure that somebody is taking that convening power there. And I know you said you didn't want to use the word czar, but I think from now on they will be called the bus stop czar. So thank you for that, and thank you for bringing these and for the level of detail you provided. Very grateful. Councillor Seaton.
Sorry to interrupt you, Chair, but there are two declarations of interest I should have made. One is that I am um, a trustee of the FACT Community Travel Service and also chairman of the Hereward Community Rail Partnership. Whilst not pecuniary, I should declare them.
Thank you. That's really helpful. And I know that we have Edwina online, so she will advise if there's any item that means you're not able to vote on. Edwina, is there anything that immediately springs to mind there? We absolutely can, yes. Chris, do you want to?
Yes, yes, I'm chairman of the Hereward Community Rail Partnership and also a trustee of the FACT Community Travel Service.
Thank you, Edwina. That's extremely helpful. And thank you for chipping in straight away on that. I really appreciate that. So we're now going to move on to item 4, which is the Combined Authority Forward Plan. Are there any questions or comments on this item? Okay, in which case we're going to take this as noted. There is no vote required on this item, so we will move through to the Director's Highlights Report. Steve Cox, who is the Executive Director for Place and Connectivity, will introduce the report. Steve, over to you.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, everybody. I won't take too long going through it. I know we've got a very long agenda this morning, but just some highlights this time around. Reference to a couple of events that the Mayor and others have been to, the England's Economic Heartlands Conference and also the Road Safety Summit, the Vision Zero Summit. A summary of those events is included. Some important updates on a couple of projects that you'll be familiar with that aren't on the agenda today, but are ongoing. The A141 update and the A10 update, and you can see where we are currently with those two projects. And then an active travel update also included for members to be kept up to speed with that. And the final point is the outcome from the Railway Ticket Office situation and the decision that was reached. We've just noted that given the time and effort that this organisation, the Mayor and others went to on that issue. So that's just a summary, Chair, of the Director's report.
Thank you, Steve. And that report is a very concise summary of what continues to be extremely hard and high quality work from an extensive transport team, many of whom are here today. And I know that I won't be alone in wanting to extend my thanks to all of them for the work that they are doing, because it really is incredibly impressive. And it's a real pleasure to be the lead member working with them. Are there any questions or comments on this report? So, right, let me just jot down the order here. So I'm going to take these in batches, if this is okay with you, Steve. So I'm going to start with Monique, and then I think I saw Andy next. He's one of our business board representatives, and then I think Councillor Davenport Ray was after that. Is there anybody else that would like to ask a question at this stage? Right, we'll take those three in a batch first. Mayor Nick, over to you.
Thank you, Chair. I want to pick up on what Steve mentioned in regards to the attendance of myself and Tim Bellamy as an officer to the Vision Zero event, actually at the fire and safety offices here in Huntingdon. The reason I want to draw attention to it, because I think of all the various events I've been to, it's one which really moved me in terms of the importance of the ambition about Vision Zero. And for those who are not aware of it, it is the idea to actually have zero road traffic accidents in Cambridgeshire and Peterborough. You know, you think, wow, that's an ambition, and bearing in mind how many cars and transport that moves around this area. But it is something that actually we should be quite proud of in this country, that we have made huge leaps and bounds in terms of trying to reduce deaths on the road. But it can be so much better. The point I'm really wanting to make is draw attention to it, the importance of it, my absolute desire to continue working with Tim and the team here to make sure that that is embedded within not just our local transport connectivity plan, but in also everything we do. It is amazing what you can do in terms of road design around housing estates, around looking at how you move people around the county to help to counter these unnecessary deaths. It's really a challenge, and it's a request of you, Chair. Um, the Vision Zero project has been supported in the past by the Police and Crimes Commissioner. I know that Darrell is a man who has always championed this as well, and it has had a lot of push and has sort of sat within the county council in Cambridgeshire. There is a real desire to continue the work that it's done, and I'm hoping that we in the Combined Authority can be part of that. But it's really a request to all the members here, and indeed, I guess, the business board. If we could all go away in our respective organisations and get it, be our district councils, be it the business board, to actually sign up to the pledge of Vision Zero. Obviously, I appreciate that. Suddenly, I'm landing that on you all, but it's a request of you representing your organisations here to take away what is the ambition of that, and hopefully it's something that you can bring back and in your own separate ways also sign up to it. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, would add my voice to that. Absolutely. Andy, I think you were next.
Well, I'll start by telling Nick, yes, we'll take that back to the business board and get it discussed, because I think it's an important topic. Mine's more specific. We had an update yesterday on Cambridge, on Soham train station usage data, so thanks, Tim, for that. It just didn't provide the comparison that we asked for in the action log. It basically says, this was the business case, here's how many tickets were issued, here's how many uses have been, but you can't, what I'm trying to establish is how are we doing relative to the business case, so we can make sure that action isn't closed until we've seen that comparison. My own rough figures suggest, and I'll have to work it out myself, that we're only at a tenth of the use described in the business case if you use the tickets, and we're at a third of the business case if we use the estimated number of passengers. So to see that done properly will be very useful. I say that in the context of there's always train stations being proposed, and they're always seen as like a golden bullet. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with Soham Station in the slightest, but we should look at how we've done, what the trends are, and the reasons for various things, so that we can plan that moving forward, which are the best projects we're taking forward. So thank you on that.
Councillor Davenport Ray.
I'm going to sneak in two questions. So the first is about the A141. This area of our geography around St. Ives is very important to our current local plan and our strategic plans for growth in that area. I can see from the papers the strategic outline business case was completed in 2021. So it was certainly with relief over the last month that our members learned about some of the progress that has happened there. I do see the length of time this process has taken will lead to some impacts on our planning department and planning applications that are already in play that depend upon this infrastructure. So swiftness, it would be of great benefit to Huntingdonshire, and I know that we're probably going to schedule an update for our members. I think that would be greatly appreciated so they can understand more of that process. On the A10, I just wanted to get some reassurance around the carbon impact of what's being planned and how that is considered in the work that's happened so far.
Thank you. Now, just checking with councillors Elsie and is it Elsie or Elsie? Elsie. Councillors Elsie and Sharp. If those are on the same topics that have been asked, I'll let you ask now. Otherwise, we'll pause, let the officers answer, and then introduce new topics in the next round. So, if Councillor Sharp, if yours is the same, please do ask that now.
Well, it's more it's a comment coming back on what Mayor Nick just made a comment on about Vision Zero. I'm the East Cams rep on the police and crime panel, and as Mayor Nick says, Darryl Preston has certainly championed Vision Zero, and I'll certainly happy to take it back to East Cams because I'm certainly personally in very much in support of it. I represent 11 villages, all the villages south and west of Newmarket. They're in Cambridgeshire. And we've got some, and I've raised this at the police and crime panel, I think the last meeting, where we've got some very, very straight roads that people that are in national speed limit, 60 mile an hour, and people put their foot down. And it's that's where a lot of the fatalities and the serious crashes are. So very much in support of that, and certainly take that back to East Cams. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Sharp. And I should have said at the beginning that I'm also happy as Chair of TIC to initiate a conversation on behalf of TIC with the Police and Crime Commissioner as well, because there are clear connections between what we're doing here and the work that's happening in the police and crime team. Okay, so we've got the key there. We've got some questions on the A141 and the A10 and some issues around the comparative data for SOAM. Tim, the SOAM one, do you want to pick that up?
Just with regards to SOAM, so the information I circulated yesterday was a progress report about basically about the information we currently got. What we're currently doing with our team is to go and do that comparison work, and we're waiting for some data from Greater Anglia, which will help us to do that around where so tickets and journeys around where the tickets are bought, where people are going, and to delve into some of that data. I know some of that information I gave yesterday was at a superficial level, and we need to get into detail and some of the granular and some what it actually means, and then also compare that with the business case, which was pre-COVID as well. So we just need to take that into consideration as well. So part of that work that my team are doing will with Greater Anglia will be able to articulate and then answer some of those questions, and then also link that to future railway stations going forward. And I think that's the important part. I think that's the important part for all of what the transport team are going to get to in going forward is we need to learn lessons from what goes well and what doesn't from all different schemes we do, whether that's active travel, whether that's rail scheme, whether that's bypasses or whatever that might be. We need to learn what worked well, what didn't, and then have that feedback loop. We got it subjectively, but I think we need to be data driven as well in that. So that's part of that process.
And who's going to pick up the one on the two roads? Steve?
Yeah, thank you. Just to come back on those 2 points. Firstly, yeah, the importance of the 141 to the local plan work delivery is absolutely recognised, and that close working with colleagues at Huntingdonshire will be important. The delay, yeah, I think it does need to get moving, but I think part of the delay over the last year or so has been to enable policy changes to be wrapped into the work. So on active travel, on climate change, and other things. So we've got to that point. We're moving to OBC, so that should now press forward very quickly. Similarly, on the A10, carbon impact is an important part of the business case process, so will be addressed both for the A10 and the A141.
Thank you. Do either of you have any follow up on that one, or shall I move on to the next question? Councillor Davenport Ray, and then Councillor Elsie. I'm going to come to Elsie. Going to come back to you next.
I suppose that the question about carbon impact also links to the action that we have in the climate action plan about reducing transport emissions by 15%. I think every project that we're looking at, we have to be going back to that climate action plan and thinking about the reduction of emissions. So I hope that that's also worked into the business cases.
Thank you. Councillor Elsie. and welcome again to the committee. Good to have
Thank
you
you,
here.
Chair. It's kind of a request, really, in as much as I think the work that TIC's doing is from what I've seen from the short time that I've been involved, is great, but it's very and understandably because of what was due to happen with HS2, it's very kind of Cambridge and South Cambridge centric in terms of the 141 and the A10. One of the worst roads and one of the highest accident black spots in the county is the junction at Wittering on the A1, where you have traffic having to go into a crawler lane and then cross a dual carriageway on a main arterial road for the whole country. There is currently an application which PCC have put in for a flyover at Wittering, which would tick all of the boxes, excuse the pun, within the tick in terms of the mayor's desire for zero accidents. I can tell you that there is an accident. It's almost laughable for the people in Wittering that there is an accident at that junction every Friday afternoon. So anybody who lives in the north of our area, avoid the A1 at that point on a Friday afternoon, because habitually there is a massive tailback and there is always an accident. And we've had resistance from Highways England, as they now are, because there have only been something like 5 fatalities in 10 years. That doesn't counter for an accident every week in that area, every week of every year. So what my request is that now that Peterborough have put in an application for a flyover and it's gone past stage 1, can the TIC add their support and help in any way possible and apply the same level of depth that they have with the 141 and the A10 to this particularly difficult junction and help us to, as Councillor Mayor Nick says, to alleviate road traffic accidents, increase the economic viability of the area, because it not only is there an RAF base there, but there is also great potential for economic development there and connectivity throughout the northern part of our region. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Are there any more questions? Councillor Shayler?
Sorry, just to go back to the Road Victims Trust and to talk about what Councillor Elsie's just mentioned. It's not only the deaths, and just to mention the Road Victims Trust, who looks after the families, and there's an enormous number of injuries as well, and we wouldn't put up with this level of damage to people and their lives and their health in any other part of life except war, perhaps. But I would like to also a quick shout out for the transport ambassadors in the school and the CPCA's work in schools. It has been really fantastic. But anything we can do to bring down this scourge. It's like a huge terrorist attack that we have every year. 30 deaths in Cambridgeshire alone. And just to point out that post-COVID, this was rising, and it looks like this last year, it has actually come down a little. But we really, really need to keep pushing this. Thank you very much, Chair.
Well, can I just come back and say thank you for that very supportive words from across all members here. I think it feels good that it is obviously a priority of the combined authority and indeed the TIC, and I'm sure that will be reflected obviously in the LTCP. If I move on to one final sort of acknowledgement of support, in the report that Steve put together, he noted the importance of the change of government policy around the proposals around the ticketing office. Again, this was something that was discussed at TIC some time ago. I have to say it was from you around here that sort of allowed me to feel emboldened to kind of join other Metro mayors in putting forward the potential legal challenge against what was being proposed. I'm not going to say that it's only because of Metro mayors that the proposal was reversed. I would actually acknowledge across not just our region, but across the whole of the UK, individuals, charities, all sorts of organisations coming together in a consultation that which initially was going to be very shortened, but was obviously extended, and the true extent of public opinion about how unfair and how divisive the closure of ticketing offices would be. So it's really a thank you to you as a board for allowing me to kind of feel to go forward and giving the opportunity for the Combined Authority to be involved in that. Thank you, but a really big thank you to the community of Cambridge and Peterborough, who across the board were supportive. So thank you.
I take one more question from Councillor Davenport. Ray, are there any final requests for questions on this item? Councillor Davenport Ray.
I wanted to reflect on the climate summit that was held last week. Although that's usually within the remit of the Environment Committee, the most important takeaway for me from that event was an open letter written by young people to all politicians across Cambridgeshire and Peterborough. They've certainly offered us a challenge, but also an opportunity. So in their letter, they explained that public transportation, including trains and buses, is becoming an increasingly unattractive mode of transport. Previously used out of convenience, it's now used only as a last choice or last resort. But they say they would like to collaborate with politicians, and they would be willing to gather opinions from the public, particularly young people. So they see transport as a major concern for them as young people in their lives and limiting their opportunities. So I think there's a link there with this committee and perhaps inviting them to collaborate with us on work in the future.
Thank you. So I'm got a couple of points I wanted to raise, and then I'll pass on to officers to draw some of that together for us. Starting with that letter, yes, I mean, an incredibly powerful letter. And speaking as someone who taught in a Cambridge City sixth form college, which serves a large part of the wider region, I taught there for 13 years, and it was deeply depressing to see how quickly students passed their driving tests simply so they could get into Cambridge because the buses were not serving them as well as they should. And I know that's a huge factor in the work that the Combined Authority wants to do around bus reform, because we need to ensure that public transport is a positive choice for young people, that basically the public transport for younger people doesn't put them off using it, and that is a real shame. I actually wonder if we might invite them to present at a future TIC meeting, actually bring them in and get them to talk to us directly. I think that could be really interesting. I did want to add my thanks to Nick and the mayors for the part they played in the work on ticket offices. I think that was a very powerful part of the voices that were raised across, from the trade unions, from community groups, from disability groups. I also wanted to add my thanks to Edwina and her team for the work they did behind the scenes on that, because clearly we were discussing the issues around what kind of responses we might make, and that kind of involved a lot of looking at where the law was, and there were very, very significant and detailed briefings that we were provided with, which made the public comments so much more easy to navigate. So thank you to the officer team for that as well. And I know that officers will want to talk about the Wittering safety issue, but just to say, Nick and I have both had the dubious pleasure of walking along that road. I know, and seeing it for ourselves, and I know that Tim Bellamy, you've also seen that, and I think, yeah, it absolutely brings it home that that is a junction that needs addressing. And I think all of us probably here on the committee appreciate the importance of that junction and the importance of maintaining better road safety there, because it can't carry on, can it? It really can't. So I'd just like to then pass over to, I don't know who's going to pick these up. Steve?
I'll kick off, Chair, but I think you've probably covered most of it already, but just to reinforce that we are in touch regularly with National Highway, so we can certainly follow up on that Wittering point. And just the point that Councillor Davenport Ray made about the the link across to the Environment Committee and Climate Change. It was a discussion at the committee on Monday this week. And I think we should explore a little bit further, because of the important role transport's got in achieving our net zero targets, how we can bring perhaps some work together across the two committees, and also the impact that climate change is having on our transport network, not least in some of the drought damaged roads in the fens. There's a connection there as well. So that's something I think the two committees can work together on. Thank you.
Tim, is there anything you want to add to those?
So just to add on the wittering and the flyover. So as Steve said, that we are engaging with National Highways, but the other important party in this is the subnational transport body. So England and Heartland are identifying the A1 corridor from Sandy to north of Peterborough, and the importance of it. So you've got the wittering issue. You've also got Buxton further down the A1, etc. So there are a number of key junctions along that corridor that the subnational transport body are also putting their weight behind. So it's ourselves and with them, and collectively, I think that we need to go and lobby and engage, etc. So I think if we'll continue to do that at a technical level, and then politicians can do that as well.
Thank you. And we will very much keep the committee and local councillors and local residents, who some of the residents from that area have joined us in the public gallery, and welcome to you. So we'll obviously keep you all very much involved in those conversations. Okay, well, that is an item to note. No vote is required. Thank you very much to Steve for bringing that report, and to all the officers for the outstanding work that takes place regularly. So now I'm going to hand over, so item 6 on your agenda, I'm going to hand over to the Acting Assistant Director of Transport, Tim Bellamy, to introduce the LTC report, which is coming back to the committee, having been last presented at our meeting in March earlier this year. Tim, over to you.
Thank you, Chair.
Hang on, Tim, sorry, before you start, I know Edwina has some comments to make. She's been looking at the declaration of interest issue. Edwina, would you like to speak now? Thank you, Edwina, and hopefully that's a good, clear answer for you. Do you want to come back on that?
Thank you, Chair. I'll be careful with what I say.
Thank you, appreciate that. Right, Tim, second chance.
Thank you, Chair, and good morning, members. I'm here to present the Local Transport and Connectivity Plan. This plan and the associated documentation that you will see in the appendices will be crucial in ensuring that we collectively deliver a well-coordinated, integrated and sustainable transport system that addresses the diverse needs of our community while considering factors such as safety, environment and the economic development. There have been a number of changes made to the plan since the document came to this committee in March, and also subsequently to board in September. Namely, these are related to the publication of the plan for drivers done by central government. We've reflected that within in the LTCP. The further development to our single assurance framework, so that's been integrated into the section on assessment, implementation, and funding to give that more clarity on that, and that takes us a step further than two of our peer organisations, Oxfordshire and the Transport for West Midland, who haven't progressed it as far, and therefore we have taken us that step beyond within our plan. The other two areas of changes in the Greater Cambridge section, we've removed with reference to making connections and how we're taking that forward. And then also with regard to changing leadership at Peterborough City Council, we've added a statement within the Peterborough section around the need for the hiring authorities to sign off any of the demand management type measures or within the area. All of these are detailed and reflected in the plan, but also detailed on in paragraph 3.4 of the cover report. So basically, to conclude, transport serves as a fundamental enabler, playing a pivotal role in facilitating diverse aspects of our society, the economy, and daily life. This plan therefore aims to ensure that we collectively deliver a strategy across the region, ensuring that transport offers positive impact for the people and businesses of Cambridgeshire and Peterborough. Thank you, and I'm happy to take questions.
Thank you. And I'm sure there will be quite a few questions on this item. Before I open to questions, obviously, this long-standing thanks to officers continues, but there are two specific things I wanted to raise here. First of all, thank you to Peterborough for engaging really positively in a very short time, and I appreciate Councillor Elsie gave me a short meeting last week so that I could introduce him to Tick. And I think it was about the only half an hour he'd had free in those previous weeks because of the number of briefing meetings that everyone has had to be part of. So appreciate the very positive, frank and constructive discussions that I know have taken place on this item. Thank you to you and your team for that. And also thank you to officers who I know, having had a meeting, I think it was a Friday evening, wasn't it? Then worked pretty much through the weekend to ensure that the changes were applied and were able to be fed back and further discussed, and all ready for this meeting and for the leader strategy meeting that took place last week. So thank you for all the constructive and positive engagement that has taken place on that. It is much appreciated by myself as chair and transport lead. Okay, I would like to open this out for questions and comments. We have Councillor Elsie. Do we have anyone else at this stage who would like to log a comment? Councillor Sharp. Okay, Councillor Seaton. We'll start with that, and please do raise your hand if you'd like to be added to my list. Councillor Elsie, over to you.
Thank you, Chair. And I would like to echo your comments in terms of the effort and the amount of work that's been put in over a very, very short space of time to get Peterborough to a point where we can actually agree this and move forward. It's been quite refreshing to work with people who have got a can-do attitude. So thank you for that. I've got a couple of points to raise on the LTCP. As the chair said, I've had literally about half an hour between meetings in the last 2 weeks. So I haven't read the 850-page document in as much detail as I would ordinarily have liked to have done. So I'm not going to take too much credit for these points because these arise from a discussion with our learned mayor, Councillor Sanford, who's sitting in the audience today. But I believe they're very pertinent points. The first one is that the Peterborough section of the LTCP rightly mentions poor frequency of evening buses in Peterborough, which are hourly on most routes. What it doesn't mention is the lack of connectivity between those various bus routes. Most of them terminate within Queensgate and leave people with somewhere between 45 minutes to an hour before they can get a connecting bus. Dare I say it about my city, Queensgate bus station isn't the most desirable place to be spending hours in an evening, on any evening. So this has a detrimental effect on people's desire to travel, but also on safety and security. It also has a massive impact on nighttime economy because people just can't move about the city on public transport in the way that they should be able to, which then obviously has a knock-on effect to people indulging in the nighttime activity. Can I ask that this is quite a serious issue to Peter, but can I ask that this is looked at in more detail? That's my first point. The second point is that in the Peterborough section of the LTCP, the report mentions Peterborough's poor rail connectivity with surrounding areas. For example, routes to Ipswich, and rightly so, because that obviously spans the whole of the combined authority area. But from a Peterborough perspective, the connectivity into Northamptonshire is equally important. At the moment, there isn't a direct rail service into Northampton. The only way that you can do so is to go down to London and then reroute yourself. And there is one bus, which is the X4, which can take up to 3 hours for a journey between Peterborough and Northampton via Corby, Kettering, and Wellingborough. Can I ask that the combined authority officers talk to the England's Economic Heartland Strategic Partnership, and in particular reference to the Strategic Rail Objectives report, which lists as a medium-term priority the reopening to regular passenger traffic of the rail line between Oakham and Corby, which would enable through journeys to be made from Peterborough through to Corby, Kettering, and Wellingborough. This would have a massive impact on the economy in Peterborough, because there are a number of people who commute from Northampton into Peterborough and vice versa. And if we can increase these economic benefits and at the same time offer a viable alternative to use of the car, then this has to be seen as a good thing. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And I think we've been scribbling away there. Come back to that in a second, but if I could just then take Councillor Sharp and Councillor Seaton. So Councillor Sharp first, please.
Thank you, Chair. I've got a few comments. I wasn't on the committee when this was last discussed back in March, so I'm not privy to what was discussed then. A general comment: I think we shouldn't just be relying on buses. We should be looking at light rail as well. And like Councillor Elsey, it's a monumental document that I've gone through it as well as I can. But it's been a war and peace. Page 50. I'm going to make a few comments really. Page 50. We talk about road space reallocation. We then, in page 35, sorry, we need to be situations where it's necessary to actively discourage private car use. We talk about demand management. I mean, I already feel that the County Council and the GCP are creating congestion in Cambridge City anyway by shutting certain roads, restricting lanes. And that's certainly happening where some of the bus companies are making representation that it's delaying their buses. And then we talk about reallocating space in favour of public transport and active travel, developing a new road user hierarchy. Then if I move on to East Cams, the particular one there, I welcome the comments about Cambridge Ipswich. Dullingham Station is in my division, but it is a huge piece of infrastructure that needs to happen if we're going to increase any services along that route. Because yes, the Snailwell loop is important, but we've got to be dualling from Dullingham to Cambridge, the actual rail track. Otherwise, the capacity can't increase at all. And I know last time, certainly locally, we've been lobbying Network Rail, and that they were talking last time we spoke was 2041 as to when that possibly could be dualled, which obviously is 18 years time, and I'm not sure that knowing the slippage of these things that will happen. I welcome on page 138, it's page 9 of the East Cams, the bit about the cycling walking. I chair the bus cycling walking group in East Cams, and yes, we've done a lot of work in the last 3 or 4 years getting schemes ready, looking for funding, because the issue you have in the rural areas is to get active travel footpath routes is a lot more expensive than it is in the cities, because you've obviously already got the infrastructure there, and the routes are a lot longer as well. So I recognise its cost, but it still it still is a challenge. If they then go on to Cambridge City detail, yes, we've got a reference in there that the making connections congestion charge proposals didn't go ahead because of a lack of political consensus at that time. There's no mention about the fact that the 58% of residents who didn't want it. It just to me seems that it's at that time it's just being parked for the moment until it's more convenient. And then, yes, Cambridge South is welcome. Soham, as was mentioned earlier on, Soham Station, yes, but we need the more connectivity. I think I'll stop there, Chair, because basically I'll just be going over some of the points I've previously made, but I've got massive concerns about certain of the comments within the document. Thank you.
Thank you, and appreciate the level of detail that you've raised those in. Councillor Seaton.
Thank you, Chair. I'm not going to repeat what Councillor Sharp has gone through, because I do agree with quite a lot of what he's already said. But a couple of things that I would like to, that I have concerns about, and that is, I think, page 36, where it says use of fiscal powers to shift private car use. And on page 23, modal filters, which I still have difficulty with knowing exactly what that means. On the site, I mean, there are a lot of things in here that I do agree with, but there are things that do give me quite great concern for a very rural area like Fenland. We do, as Councillor Sharp say, we also have a walking and cycling and mobility strategies with mapping for towns of Whittlesea and Wisbech and Chatteris. So we're very welcome to see that within that report. But as has been said, I do have concerns, and they're not totally been moved by this latest document. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Seaton. Any more questions at this point, or shall I pass back to officers to address? Tim, do you want to start?
Yeah, happy to start. So in relation to the comment from Peterborough, so the point around the evening services and Queen's Bay, I think that does also impact on the next agenda item around how we take things forward around the buses and how we deliver those buses when people need them, etc., and impact on quality of life. But the other point is around safety. So we've had a really enriched discussion around safety and killing service injury, not just around that, it's also about perceived safety, and we need to look at whether people want to use our services as well. So you're talking about Queen Gate bus station isn't where you want to be. It's around how do we make that a more attractive environment. So it's the two parts of that as well. So it's providing the services and actually people wanting to use them as well. So I think that there are two parts on that. The other point around the connection to Northamptonshire. So the two things on that is one is around we are working with England National Heartland, so part of the working group on the connectivity study between Northamptonshire and Peterborough. So ourselves and also Peterborough City Council are on that working group. So that exploring options. So it's not just around the rail options, but also how do we improve bus services all around that. And also part of that work is looking at short, medium, and longer term options. So you look, rail connectivity might be medium to longer term, but actually what can we do in a short term that's viable as well? So how do we take that forward? And we step in that space along with the City Council to help us to take those things forward. And then on regard Councillor Sharp and Councillor Seaton comment, so the first thing around innovation, so buses are a key component part of the strategy, and that's embedded within all of the document. But I think we are looking at innovation, so looking at how we can make a step change in certain areas. So like rail was mentioned by Councillor Sharp, but I think there are other options as well. So more innovative solutions. I think some of those will come through with Beach and March in due course, but also it's not just in that area. So in other urban conurbations or even rural conurbations and connectivity where we can use more innovative solutions. And I think we as a combined authority are trying to actually step into that space. The point around demand management and road reallocation, I think the LTCP provides a menu of measures. It isn't meant to be prescriptive. It's a menu of measures that can be used across the region. And these will ultimately, as mentioned in the introduction, will need the agreement of the resident highways authority. So we're not prescribing it as from the combined authority that you will do demand management or modal filters. They are to be developed from the bottom up, and where there are general agreement and both political but also with the general public about taking these things forward, and then ultimately they need to be signed off and approved by the highways authorities, whether that's Peterborough City or by Cambridgeshire County. And then the last point around active travel. So we are engaging with Act Travel England around connectivity and using active travel in our more rural areas, because I think I said before at the committee is the LTM 120 is not fit for purpose in some of our rural areas, and if we try to go down that route, then one of the cost will be prohibitive, but also how we actually make these practical in more rural areas. So I think we are continuing those discussions, and my active travel lead is talking to Act Travel England on this and engaging with, I think, all constituent councils around looking at active travel in rural areas and no concerns. So I do believe that some meetings are being put in with members to address that going forward.
Thank you. So I've got Councillor Sharp would like to come back. We've got Councillor Davenport Ray. Do we have any other people that wish to speak at this point? Councillor Sharp first, please.
Just very briefly, Chair. Thank you for that, Tim. It's really on the active travel bit at the end. LTN 20, yes, we need to get safety for cyclists and obviously all road users, but within the rural areas, quite often that's not practical. So we either end up with nothing or something that's at least partially acceptable. And I think personally we need to go down the partially acceptable route. So I welcome the comments there. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Davenport Ray.
First of all, I wanted to thank Tim and the other officers for how closely they've worked with our constituent officers on the appendices for each area. I think being able to capture the ambitions in terms of transport for all of our areas is not a small job. So well done on that. I wanted to come also to the road prioritization topic that's been mentioned. We had a really interesting summit with council leaders and the bus operators in our region. And the number one takeaway I took from speaking with them is the only way that they see forward in improving the reliability of their services, the timetabling of their services, is dedicated road space. And I'm amazed by how an issue in Newmarket Road in Cambridge could affect whether a child can get to college in St. Neots, because all the routes are so interlinked. And where they don't have road space, it affects the urban and the rural areas at the same time. I also wanted to touch on some of the risks around not having an LTCP. The Department of Transport has been very clear that in future, if we want funding for transport projects, this is exactly the type of document that they will expect us to have to be able to fund them. And so I think it's very important that we have a document, and it has that menu, as Tim likes to call it, the menu of options that enable us to grab onto those funding opportunities when they arrive, even if we choose not to use all of the menu. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further comments on this item, Councillor Shayler? Anyone else? This is going to be my last round of asking.
Thank you
Speak
very
now,
much,
forever hold your peace.
Chair.
Right, Neil.
I have, and our county highways officers have had a lot of view of this because this is coming back again. So I don't want to make any general comments. I'm very much in favour of this going forward. I want to ask a question, given that there's been a little bit more time, and this kind of relates to it. I wonder if anybody can comment on the modelling work. This relates to the previous meetings, I realise, but it clearly relates to the ambitions here. So if anybody could let us know how far that work has progressed. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Who would like to pick up on that?
Yeah, so just regarding the modelling work, so we are progressing the regional transport model with county and city colleagues. We're happy to provide a update briefing following the meeting, and we'll circulate that round.
Sorry, I'm just calling up my notes on the voting arrangements for this one. Those people who are perhaps tuning in for the first time may not appreciate that the voting arrangements for combined authority items are complicated, and we always have to check we're doing the right voting arrangements for the right item. So I have that in front of me now. So I will propose these recommendations. Could I have a seconder, please?
I'm happy to second that with grateful thanks to the officers, Chair.
Thank you very much. And I love the fact there were lots of hands going up there, which is really helpful. We have two items here. We have the noting and the recommendation. Actually, it's only recommendation B, yeah, that we have to vote on. Are we all happy to take? I've got a note here that says take them in block, but pretty much it is just the one recommendation. So just going to go with that. So we will now move to the vote. Can I see all votes in favour, please? Can I see all votes against? And I think that covers off all the voting members, doesn't it? So that's 5 in favour, 2 against. So and that includes both Peterborough and the County Council in favour, so that is carried. So that will go forward to the board for further discussion next on the 30, what's the date? The 29th, isn't it? Thank you. Now, we have another big item coming up. I'd like to power on, but if anyone needs a 5-minute comfort break. Right, okay, I'm going to...
Just to say, just clarify, 6 in favour, 2 against.
Oh, sorry, 6 in favour, 2 against. Yes, of course, sorry, Mayor Nick, I was forgetting you. I'm going to call a 5-minute comfort break. I'm going to be really strict. We will reconvene at exactly 11:26. Can we pause the live stream, please? start? Yeah, are we live? Wonderful. Thank you very much. So we now move on to item 7, which is the bus strategy update. And Neil Byers, our transport consultant, will introduce the report. Neil, over to you.
Thank you, Chair. Morning, everybody. So this paper sets out a number of recommendations around the bus strategy work they were doing, particularly around the network review, and also sets out some recommendations around the BSIP Plus funding and some items to note around some of the wider work that we're undertaking and decisions made by government around fares. This paper is all about setting out what we do in the short term with securing tendered services. So we took it, the board took decisions in September about retaining 51 services, and 19 of those services needed a further review to improve them. This paper sets out the recommendations for those 19 services and proposes a way forward to recommend on to the board. It also makes recommendations around the BSIP Plus funding, how we secure those services, but also how we continue to invest to support those services with the wider activities that we need to do around stops and shelters, fares, the vehicles themselves, and promotion, which will be really important to make sure people use the tendered services and the wider network as well. The paper sets out some thoughts for how we might take forward further investment if funding becomes available, either through government or other sources, for discussion, and then sets out some of the work we've been doing around auditing the network, which I heard public questions on earlier on, which we absolutely support and look to take forward. Within the paper, we make some recommendations about new services to introduce, taking on board the BSIP Plus funding, and also heard the comments earlier on around the role of demand responsive transport and how we might make that flexible, and we'll be designing that into the work we develop with each of the authorities on those services. Happy to take questions.
Thank you. When we move to the discussion on this, what I am going to suggest is that we split this discussion into 3 sections. That we have a discussion on the first part around the routes. We have a discussion on the second part, which are recommendations for BSIP funding. And we then have a discussion on the third part, which are discussions around potentially future activities. I have had a request from Councillor Todd Jones, who is a Cambridge City Councillor and chair of Cambridge North Area Committee, who wishes to speak to that third part of the discussion. So if it's okay with Democratic Services, I will call him to speak at that part of the discussion. So first of all, I'm going to open out for a discussion on that first section, which is around the bus network review on the routes. Would anyone like to speak to this section? Okay, so I think Councillor Elsie just got in there under the wire first, then Councillor Seaton, then Councillor MacDonald, then Councillor, oh my goodness, then Councillor Sharp, Councillor Shaler. Might as well go for the full pack here, Councillor Davenport, right? Right. We'll see if we can get around all of you together. If your questions are very granular, I might break that into 2 sections just so Neil doesn't have to take 2 pages of notes in order to be able to respond. So, Councillor Elsie, over to you.
Thank you, Chair. It's really just to highlight the need, and I know it's within the report, but the need for support on the 29, the service 29, which is Peterborough City Hospital to Hampton. We really need to communicate with the people of Hampton that it's a case of use it or lose it, because the amount the passenger cost of £74.71 is unsustainable. It was championed to have this service, so it's kind of a case of use it or lose it. So any support that we can be given on that would be helpful. The second part is the 2323A Queensgate to Lynchwood, which is a thriving business area. I know that the report identifies further information. Can I just have some idea of time frame in terms of when that information will be available to us? Thank you.
Councillor Seaton.
Thank you, Chair.
couple of things that I'd like to repeat, I suppose. I've asked this before, and that is that the parishes, I think, were last consulted in 2015 on the requirements that they look for, not necessarily they will get, but that they look for. And I know that it has been said in the past that they would be contacted. I was at a parish council meeting last night, and they still have had no contact with the CPCA. There are 7 parishes that are going to constitute a meeting within the next 2 to 3 weeks, where they can put forward their combined voice on a menu, if you like. Not necessarily that they're going to expect to get everything, but if they don't put forward their ideas, then they won't get anywhere. So, can I just ask that, and I will forward the information to Tim and Neil, that we can have that meeting, or the CPCA can have a conversation with the parishes as soon as possible, because I keep being asked and nothing up to now has been done. So that's one point. And the other point is, which I had mentioned before, I understand the financial restrictions on commercial services within rural areas. And I know that Ting has been going for considerable time now and has met with a degree of success, and how that can be rolled out into other areas. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. And I think some of those might come into the discussions around future networks. So when we get to the answers, Neil, if you answer off the ones that are in the first section on this, and then we'll pause the other bits to come in on that future network discussion. I think Councillor MacDonald, you were next.
Thank you, Chair. First of all, I'd like to thank Neil and the officers. We had some very good discussions, I think, very productive discussions with the district councillors in the area in South Cambs. We were trying to think out of the box. Neil and the team came up with, a range of options, and we've tried to meet halfway in terms of what we're trying to do in the combined authority and what we're trying to achieve for residents. So I appreciate what he's done and welcome it. In many instances, it's not perfect. I've still got some of my villages with significant gaps. I have been asked by one of my colleagues, and I hope Neil doesn't mind raising a further question around, I think it's the 18 service and the Wilbrahams. I think the reference in the paper is it 2 services a week? It feels like something out of the 18th century. I know there are reasons for this, and especially around the Wilbrahams, they've just asked for another look at this, please, if it's possible. Whether that be an evaluation of on demand. I know on demand, both in the questions and the comments from Chris and others, have been raised, but if we could think about that again. But I think overall, the paper and the review is a step forward. We've engaged with the parishes in quite a transparent way, and that's been very much welcomed. And I think that's a good model for the future. So thanks again for all the work, and please take a look at the Wilbrahams, because you don't want any 18th century services. Thank you.
Councillor Sharp.
Thank you, Chair. Thanks. One point really, but thank to Neil he did meet with myself and the East Cambs leader and officers a few weeks ago to discuss these. So that's really good. And I have got one about future, so I'll save that till later. And it's touching on what Councillor MacDonald said about the Wilbrahams. So it might get them into the 19th century. But in terms of and again, I know we've discussed this, Neil, it's the number 11, which at the moment, prior to Stagecoach withdrawing, the old 11, shall we say, the old Route 11 went into Bottisham and village and gave access from other villages for the GP surgery for the village college. When Stagecoach took it over, and it's great they did, because otherwise we wouldn't have had a service, that stop into Bottisham ceased. I know there's been lobby. I know Mayor Nick's been lobbied about it, and the MP and other number of parish councils. So it won't be new. But I understand the difficulties. But it was in one of the routes that was under 2.4 that was deemed to be performing well, and it is performing well in that sense. But I'd welcome sort of as much as we can do to try to get that reinstated, but I understand the difficulties that you have. Thanks.
Councillor Shadow, are you okay for us to keep going? Yeah, is that all right? Thanks.
Thank you very much, Chair. First, I want to thank the wonderful work that's been going on routes, and it highlights the completely different business model, the fact that we are looking for service and the wider benefits to community and economics. I just wanted to make a very quick comment, Chair, that this stage that we're talking about, I call the rescue stage, where we are patching the problems that we currently have. And I would like to highlight that our future, the number 3 needs to keep this in mind so that whatever we make for the future, we do not have to rescue it again. Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Davenport-Ray.
Yeah, I wanted to also thank Neil for the work that time you've taken to work with our local councillors. I think it might be unwise to expect our very slim transport team to be able to liaise with every single parish council. And I think perhaps each of us and each of our local councillors needs to take on a role in being the voice for those communities in order to work with the team who have accurately looked at the right routes. So thank you for working with us on that. But I think that also the appreciation in Huntingdonshire is the approach that we're taking overall here, that we're not waiting for the problem to arise unexpectedly. We're taking it head on and knowing which routes are going to be the challenging ones, and we welcome that. I would also just mention Ting, as it's in my area. I think at the moment, Ting has reached max capacity. If you want to book it on the day, it's already booked because so many people want to use it. So that tells us that there's lots of people who want to use it. It's not perfect, and I think you've highlighted well in the report some of the things we need to rethink about how the service works, but the value of the service is very high. And we have rightly brought to this list all the services that go above a certain threshold of cost per journey. That's a very prudent thing for us to do. But what it doesn't do is reflect the health implications and the social implications and the costs of losing those services in the rural areas. So I think it's important we don't just look at the financials, but at the other implications as well.
Thank you. There's a lot there. Neil, do you want to go through those?
Yeah, thank you, everybody. So I'll try and work through in order. So totally agree around Service 29. Absolutely need to work with you and your officers as well around the approach for that one. As we say within the paper, introduced as a trial to see if there's an opportunity to provide an alternative connection. If that's going to be used, then great. If it isn't, then I think using your words, they're going to use it or lose it idea. So I think we need to work with you on that. Timescales is the next board. So we want to be able to make sure that we've got recommendations, decisions across all of the services in time for the next financial year. So that's the timescale that we're working to effectively come to conclusions across all of those services. So that's the timescale for
Neil, just to clarify that, when you say next board, you mean the absolute next board or the board coming up in January?
Sorry, yeah. So
January
cycle. So January tick through to January board. Thank you for. I think across all of the points that have made around engagement, particularly engaging locally on the upcoming parish meeting, yeah, send us the details and we'll attend and listen and feedback and get that input. I think that conversation informs both what we're doing on these recommendations and the further conversation about what might be next. And I think across a lot of those, a lot of the comments made is this is the short term. Let's get the system working. We've introduced a process and amount of information and data and recommendations that we've not had before. How do we improve that across the whole of the network, both the services that we fund and those that the operators run commercially? So there's a way of working that we're looking to introduce through this process, and we'll improve it each time we do it. So we'll take on those points of feedback around who and where do we engage with, how do we use you, how do we use parishes, how do we use other organisations to help us make sure we've got good information. Welcome that invite as well. I think moving on to the next around kind of Service 18 having another look. we'll have a look at the information. I think there's little that can be done in terms of significant changes to that service. So it's providing effectively shopping journeys to the market town. So the extent that we can make improvements is potentially been exhausted, but we can have another look, see if there's a way to do that. Around there might be something around promotion to make sure that people are aware that it's there, so we can work with you on that. Just on the points on Service 11, I think there's an issue around attended service and the commercial network, in that we can't put services into an area where services operating commercially, and there's also be a trade-off between the faster journeys and those that connect into particular communities. So we can have a longer conversation around with yourselves and with those communities how to kind of best serve overall across the whole of that route for Service 11 across other services within that area as well. I think that'll be part of the ongoing work around network review and how we serve everybody. I think the other comments and points were probably not necessarily questions for me to answer, but certainly welcome all of those comments. And I think they form part of our kind of medium to longer term approach to improving the bus network, making it to connect into other modes of transport as well. I'll pause there.
Thank you. And are there any more comments on this first part of the paper? So I would suggest now that we look at whether anyone has any questions on the options around the use of BSIP Plus, or comments on that piece. Councillor Davenport Ray, anyone else? Over to you.
I wanted to ask a question about the bus stop audit work. We had a public question about this at the start as well. I suppose I'm just looking for some clarity in what the combined authority's role is in the space of a bus stop. If I think about my own ward, I have bus stops where there's a landowner, there's an owner of the bus stop, there's a maintenance contract on the bus stop, there's an advertising contract on the bus stop. All of those are 4 different public or private organizations. What is the combined authority's current, I suppose, jurisdiction or right over that space, and what is our ambition over how we want to operate in that space?
Thank you. I think this is probably going more into kind of section 2.15 actually, so I'm just going to pause that for a moment before we go on to that bit. Are there any more questions that are specifically around the sections just above that on BSIP Plus? Okay, now I've deferred this bit from public questions to here, because it's slightly different when you have a councillor coming to speak. So I don't know if Councillor Todd Jones, you just wanted to come and ask your question as part of this net part of the discussion, which we were looking at 2.15 onwards.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Thank you. Everyone listening, to introduce myself. So I'm Councillor Mike Todd Jones. I represent Arby Ward and Cambridge City Council, and I'm also Chair of the North Area Committee. So that's representing residents in a significant part of North Cambridge. And basically, I'm here to sort of put a question for consideration, but also make a general point. Following a North Area Committee on Monday night, where we had the representative from Stagecoach East, the business manager, who was grilled by from public questions from residents and by members about the withdrawal of 5 out of 6 stops on the Bus A route down Histon Road, a pretty important route through the north of the city, and in the past it's has gone through the city centre and out to southern Cambridge, stopping at the railway station and also at Addenbrooke's. But with only 1 stop left, it's a significant disadvantage to a lot of residents in that part of the city, particularly older residents and those with mobility issues. So there was a very, I think, reasonable request that at least a second of those stops could be reinstated on the northern part of Histon Road. And also a key theme that came out of that meeting was whether in any way the reinstatement of one of the city services, probably the City 8 in the previous iterations, also went directly through without changing in the city centre to the southern part of the city, stopping at the railway station, Addenbrooke's, and I think onto Trumpington Park and Ride. Now, the sections in the report, 2.11 to 2.15, talk about further investment, perhaps in the future, and future governments.
And I think this scenario that I've described to you at North Area Committee and the needs of residents in that part of the city, I think really kind of sort of pinpoints some of the problems we have in terms of trying to deal with the bus network and how it can be reviewed, improved to support our residents. So I'm kind of putting in a plea for consideration of those two particular points, whatever leverage combined authority might have with Stagecoach, just in terms of reinstating one of those, a second of those two stops that I mentioned out of the six that are affected, but also consideration in the future of a through route again from the north of the city to the south of the city without changing the city centre, which would be much, much appreciated. So that's kind of there's a kind of couple of specific things in there, but also a kind of general plea for, in terms of future considerations by the combined authority, that these particular issues could be taken account of. So that's the general sort of scenario, and happy to take a question or two if that's appropriate. But thank you, Chair.
Thank you, and thank you for raising that. I think that's probably sufficient information at that stage for Neil to be able to respond, though obviously we can keep the discussion going. So thank you very much. And I think a lot of this starts to really feed into the importance of not only, as Councillor Shayla mentioned, saving a bus network, but securing it and shaping it for the future as well. So to see if there's any more questions on and comments from the committee on that part, on the kind of future part of the network here and issues around future plans. If not, we've got a question therefore from Councillor Davenport-Ray and the statement from Councillor Todd Jones as well, if you'd like to come back on those.
Yeah, so thanks for those questions and points. I think within the paper, what we're setting out is a program of work that we need to undertake to understand what the starting point is, and recognising the points that there's a whole mix of stakeholders and parties that are involved in on-street infrastructure, from the installation and maintenance, and then the improvement. So we heard earlier on around accessibility around the highway, and then how does that highway relate to the stop itself and the infrastructure, and then the digital information, so whether that be real time as well. So there's a whole plethora of aspects of on-street infrastructure that needs to be considered. So I think what we're looking to do through this paper is set out a real need to invest more time and effort, and then probably funding to make a significant improvement into the on-street infrastructure. So I think what we're saying is we don't have the answers to those big questions yet, but we know we need to find answers to them. And there's a whole range of roles that a combined authority can take within that as well. So quite often local ownership of on-street infrastructure can be very empowering for a community, but also that brings liabilities with it as well. So I think we need to go through effectively an options process to say what is the right approach for a combined authority, on one hand being a funding organisation, or another being an asset owner and a developer of infrastructure. And that will form part of the work in the medium term around bus reform as well.
Thank you. And I think there's a very interesting connection, and I'm firmly putting on my Cambridge representative hat on here for a moment, but there's a very interesting connection, I think, between your question on infrastructure and Councillor Todd Jones's question around routes. And I think all comments on routes, the meeting that you're suggesting with parish councillors, suggestions on where routes are currently not working. I think all those are things we need to be gathering, and I know that officers are looking at formalising a process and how we go forward on that and how we really gather routes. But I said, with my Cambridge hat on, I think that issue of bus infrastructure. So residents in Cambridge have faced significant disruptions around infrastructure improvements, including new bus stops, which have taken a long time in some parts of the town, parts of the city, to be put in place. And what they're then seeing are the operators not using those routes particularly fully for the residents that live nearby. So they've faced the disruption of having those stops installed, but then they're not seeing the kind of high usage of it because the buses aren't stopping there. And I think that's something, as we think about the infrastructure moving forward, it's making sure we've got the right stop in the right place, and that if we're putting stops in places, that residents, I think, have a reasonable assumption that buses will be stopping for them at those stops. So something for us to consider, I think, and really shows why work on the bus stop infrastructure is so important and so essential to what we're doing. Are there any further? Yes, Rebecca, I'm going to take this as the final round of questions and comments on this paper. So if anyone else has got anything they want to say, now is the time to do it. So we have Rebecca, who's our business board rep. We have Councillor Sharp. Would anyone else? Councillor Elsie. Right, drawing the line there. Those three. Rebecca.
Thank you, Chair. And just picking up on the theme of the saving, securing and the future, just to put a plea in for the future and extending the engagement to those business organisations. We have talked in the past about big businesses and those who perhaps put on their own shuttle buses or whatnot, but actually there's a lot from their small businesses. So things like the Federation of Small Businesses and the Chamber of Commerce would be really useful organisations to engage with to get that feed in. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Sharp.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, touching on the future ones, and Neil is aware of these, I think, one is the B2B 1102 group are looking at a faster service through from Burwell to try and get people out of cars. They can get a quick sort of shuttle into Cambridge, and that's and the other one, just touching on, I know similarly that group is also looking at a service that goes down from Bottisham through the Wilbraham's, Fulbourn down to Addenbrooks as well. Again, obviously this is all restricted by funding, but certainly that I know that they've certainly been doing some work on that, which I think is probably filtered through to yourself.
Thank you, Councillor Elsie.
Thank you, Chair. It would be remiss of me not to mention the Wittering service here. I'd like to thank, obviously, yourself and Mayor Nick and Tim for attending and experiencing firsthand what a disastrous situation it is. And with three of the tremendous campaigners in the audience here today, it would be remiss of me not to. I'm aware that there are conversations going on, and I know that they're moving in a positive direction. But I feel I need to champion this service because it is so desperately needed. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. And I was just trying to super quick check exactly what item that proposal is there. It's 2.9. So I know that's partly why those campaigners are here today, to see the decision that we make that includes item 2.9 there. And I would say a huge congratulations to those campaigners for engaging so positively and in such an evidence-driven way, which has been incredibly helpful. Thank you. Neil, over to you. Last round.
Yeah, thank you. So absolutely recognise the points about engaging with business, also from the health sector as well. Another aspect where there's significant demand, and we're trying to find more and better ways to engage with those sectors, so we can get the data that's out there, and it's kind of bringing it together in a way that's useful for everybody. So absolutely agree with that. And so if there are useful forums for us to engage through with FSB, Chamber, and likewise, then please do let us know. I think sometimes as transport planners, we don't always know what's out there in terms of other ways to engage. So definitely welcome the points around kind of new services in Wittering as well. We continue to work on that. And when they're asked, I think what I'm hearing is we've got the right area of priorities, and then it's getting into the detail of the specifics about how do we take those forward and how might we fund them.
Thank you. And this feels to me as transport leaders a very important step in the work that we're doing to improve a public transport network that, quite frankly, has had far too many years of neglect. And I'm very grateful to all the officers for the work that's been put in on this, and also for the engagement of the committee, and particularly noting the detailed responses that representatives are making on their particular areas. That's been extremely helpful. Now, we have a large number of recommendations on this. It goes from A to H, some of which are noting, but most of which are recommending. Unless anyone says otherwise, I would really like to take these on block. Does anyone object to that? Thank you. I'm very happy to propose this. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Davenport-Ray, thank you. We will now move to the vote. Can I see all those in favour of the recommendations, please? think that's unanimous, isn't it? Thank you. Thank you very much for that. Thank you, officers, for your hard work. Now, I've allowed quite a lot of discussion on these two items because they're quite big, wide-ranging items. We have two more items that require voting, and I know that they're equally important, but I'm imagining that we will have a shorter discussion on some of these. So I'm very aware that we have representatives from Peterborough, for example. I think you need to leave at 12:30. Is that correct? Yeah. So let's be aware of that for these two voting pieces, please. But two extremely important local items. And that does mean apologies to our representative from Network Rail. I do need to ask you to wait until we've had these two items because they are ones that we do require a vote on. So can I please then call for item 8 is the BP roundabout non-motorised users crossing study, and that's Robert Jones, Transport Programme Manager, to introduce the report. Thank you, Robert. Over to you.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, committee members. The BP roundabout non-motorised user crossing study is a paper put forward for recommending the progress that we've made alongside the suppliers, Cambridge County Council, and also the recommendation for future funding to go on to board at the end of this month. The study sits as part of a three-phase process. CCC, Cambridge County Council, appointed a consultant to carry out this study at stage 2, and the paper goes through and describes not only the process but the public engagement, key stakeholder engagement that's been conducted throughout the process, outlines the issues associated and purpose of the process that we've been through, and the concluding process of the report of where we've got to so far with it, including the activities in 3.9 with the stakeholders engagement that we've had, and also with business leaders in item 3.10 and the interest of the local MP in 3.11. In item 3.14, we've outlined the range of costs, and I've clearly included within that those figures may appear very high, but they sit in line with the government requirement for inclusion of optimism bias. And also one of the key parameters that's becoming a lot more of public interest and therefore of interest to this committee is the carbon footprint of the project. Section 315 goes through and profiles the most expensive of all the anticipated 2 options, and that information will also be included within the MTFP, the forward plan, which is going forward to board at the end of the month. Final section includes the financial implications and some of the issues associated with the options and where we've been to, and moves on to what the future funding proposal of £550,000 is intended to cover. That concludes an overview of the paper, and I'm open to any questions.
Thank you, Robert. That's very helpful. Now, I'm going to open this out to questions. Councillor Sharp, I imagine you might want to ask a question, so I'll lead off with you. Would anyone else like to ask anything at this point? Councillor Shaler. Councillor Sharp. Rob, you're still on.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair. Not so much a question, more a comment. Yes, I know this roundabout very well. I do drive across it quite often, and totally support the proposal. To be honest, it's something, you know, to move to the next stage of looking at this, and it's something. I know James Palmer was in, but the early stage was certainly involved in it. But certainly support the recommendation.
Thank you, Councillor Shaler.
Thank you very much, Chair. This is a very interesting situation where this roundabout was recently renewed as part of the bypass arrangements around Ely and the area, which were a great improvement for road. And it really shows the before and after gear change recommendations from government. We now on county have a policy of active transport and all things. So here we have a relatively new project which is terrible for active transport. And we've been looking at this ever since we came together with the new mayor, in fact. So it's interesting how quickly these things have changed. I was there yesterday and saw it, and I absolutely agree with Councillor Sharp. This is something that needs to happen. And unfortunately, all of these retrofit things are a little bit expensive, but it needs to happen. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Any further comments? Obviously, Robert, you can respond if you like. I think there were more statements than questions, but I don't know if you just want to say anything final on that.
Yeah, there was one or two questions that were raised about the underpass option and why that would seems to have been dismissed so early on in terms of the process. So the underpass option was ruled out as part of the sifting process on the basis of cost, constructability, and poor stakeholder reception to that particular solution. The costs of building an underpass are likely to be prohibitive and disproportionate to the demand for the travel patterns in this location for the benefits that we would ultimately offer. Initial assessments indicate that the presence of high groundwater would also be a technically challenging solution in terms of potential long-term maintenance and pumping that would be required. And in terms of the 4 stakeholder workshops that have been conducted during the study, the preference for an underpass was extremely low from a community leaders, cyclists and business community point of view.
Thank you. Well, if there are no further questions, I would suggest we just under the
So
wire.
just look, just want to say, following on from obviously a lot of hard work that's been done. It's been sort of feels like it's been 2.5 years in the making since coming into office. I'm very grateful for the work that's been done. Adapting what was left behind through decisions made previously, but then the willingness to kind of engage with the community. I'm just very supportive of this. It's all the criteria for trying to get people more active and feel safe. And going back to that point I made earlier in the thing about trying to avoid road traffic accidents, I speak as somebody who visited the site personally and almost got run over. So if that's one way to get a mayor's attention, then it certainly worked. So thank you for all the work.
Thank you, and absolutely, there's been some really good work on this, and it's very pleasing to see this project progressing. So I'm happy to propose this. Councillor Sharp, I assume you would like to second? Brilliant. So can we move to the vote on this item, please? Can I see all those in favour? And that's unanimous. Thank you very much. So we are now moving on to the next item, item 9. And this is the last voting item, I believe. This is the March Area Transport Study, which will be introduced by Emma White, Transport Programme Manager. Emma.
Thank you. This paper seeks to provide an update on the March Area Transport Study and approve the change request on the underspend. In January 2023, the full business case 1 was approved, as well as the drawdown of £4 million for the construction of the March Broad Street project. The construction is progressing, and with the future High Street Fund, and photos are shown in the paper. Full business case 2 is progressing well, though a number of variations have resulted in the spend of the risk pot. We are halfway through full business case 2, but there are still uncertainties that need to be accounted for. Therefore, it is proposed to allot the £85,000 underspend from full business case 1 to the remaining risk pot. Also, in October 2022, the Combined Authority Board approved the commencement of the walking and cycling strategy. Currently, the majority of phase 1 is complete and phase 2 are continuing, and phase 2B has commenced. There is a planned underspend of approximately 124,000. It is proposed to reallocate this underspend to some additional phase and works that are all associated with active travel. Thank you.
Thank you. Really helpful summary there. Any questions or comments? Councillor Seaton, I imagine you'd like to go first on this. Any other questions or comments at this stage?
Yes, thank you, Chair.
Off you go.
Yes, there was a recent meeting with the MATS member steering group. I don't actually sit on that, but it was held on the 25th of October with CCC colleagues, and there was an indication of further work to develop the NILR would be put on hold. And this has obviously raised concerns with the councillors on that steering group. The key issues are that what does hold mean for the NILR? It's unclear as to what the plans are now for taking this forward. And without this, it is difficult to understand the implications for the full delivery of the MATS proposals. Given the complexity of the scheme and significant funding required, work needs to continue and plans put in place to secure the funding for its delivery. It is acknowledged throughout the MATS business case process that detailed design and delivery requires a longer programme due to the complexities involved, including engagement with multiple stakeholders and the environmental sensitivities around the site. Putting this programme on hold pushes these matters further into the future. The implications are that the CPCA states that the NILR is considered to generate significant additional benefit to the scheme package overall, attracting additional trips away from that residential areas, particularly the Norwood Road and the town centre, and makes a significant contribution towards achieving the MATS scheme related to the objectives. What I think we're looking for is there's the paper is being presented to the CPCA Transport and Infrastructure Committee and the board in November. We are looking for reassurances in both meetings about the NILR. These reassurances would be to ascertain that there is still a commitment to deliver this and that it has not been put on hold and that funding is still available to commence detailed design from March 2024. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Are there any other questions at this point? What I'm going to suggest is, because there are some kind of wider issues that come into that I ask Steve to pick up first, and then Emma, if you want to come in on that afterwards. Would that be okay with you both? Steve.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Just to pick up on the Northern Relief Road, which I think is the third phase of the March schemes. There's a decision that we'll be asking the board to reach on the capital programme going forward on the ability to fund that and whether it is one that we want to prioritise. There's two elements to that. One is funding for further development work of that scheme, which I think is what you're referring to. And then there's the delivery of it, which I think is in the longer term. So it will be part of, I'm sure, the considerations of the MTFP as it comes forward to board, and you'll see that or the leader will see that at the board in November, later in the month.
Emma, do you want to add anything to that? Councillor Seaton, do you want to come back on any of that? Particularly, I'm interested to know, does that reassure in terms of this paper?
To a certain extent, yes. I mean, obviously, yes, if it's part of the medium-term financial plan, but it obviously has to be approved at that. And I suppose there is concern that if it is put on hold, then the full programme sort of slips, and that's the danger for the whole of the programme of the MATS strategy.
Do you want to come back on that at all?
No, simply to note that that's recognised. It is an important scheme. It's a decision of prioritisation at through the MTFP, but obviously there's a very strong case in delivering the whole of the MATS programme, but that's an important third part of it.
Thank you. Any more comments or questions on this? Simply to reiterate, I know I sound like a stuck record, but I think it is always important, again, to thank officers on the really hard work they're doing on this and that consideration of the wider issues as well. So I will propose this. Councillor Seaton, do you want to second? So I will propose Councillor Seaton will second. Can I see those in favour of this report, please? And I think that's also unanimous. So thank you very much. And that is, I believe, the last voting item. The rest of these are to note. So what we're now going to do is move on to item 10, which I know that we're really keen to discuss, which is an update on Wisbech Rail, also known as the March to Wisbech Modal Appraisal. Matthew Lutz is our Transport Programme Manager, and he will introduce the report, but we're also joined by online from Rob Russell from Network Rail to answer members' questions on this. So we've got the opportunity to ask some questions directly to Network Rail as well. So Matthew, to you first, please.
First of all, good afternoon. I think we're just past midday. Just by way of an introduction to this agenda item, the transport team was asked at September's TIC to provide an update on Wisbech Rail, also known as the March to Wisbech Modal Appraisal. So that's what we're here for today. And before I start, it's important to acknowledge there's been a lot of public interest in this over many years, and I think quite a few of you have been involved in discussions with this over the years. So it's good to be here to provide enough progress on current work being undertaken. And it's also good to be joined by Rob at Network Rail as well to answer some of your questions. It's also important to say that the combined authority, we really do appreciate that improving connectivity offers the opportunity to transform Wisbech as a place for inward investment and provide much enhanced accessibility to key services and employment opportunities for its residents. Alongside this, Wisbech is widely recognised as one of the largest towns in England without a rail link to the main rail network. So we're actively looking at ways to positively impact the potential growth of the town. So where are we now? Well, over the years, as some of you know, engagement has taken place with the DFT, the Department for Transport, the ORR, the Office for Rail and Road, and Network Rail, with a challenge being back to the combined authority around the different potential options and the costing of these. This has been picked up in the previous Network Rail review report, and the DFT were keen on other less expensive options being further considered. So this has all led to our current state, where we've engaged Network Rail to undertake an options assessment report to consider all the on-rail options. Network Rail's initial scope didn't include the economic analysis, but thanks to their agreement, they now agree to do an economic analysis as well. The outputs of this work can assist in deciding upon a modal choice with a view that a business case will be developed following Network Rail's report. This includes the potential use of innovative technological solutions. So, joining us today is Rob Russell from Network Rail. Rob is the business development sponsor for this work and will provide details on what work is being undertaken and what the outputs will be. So, Rob, can I pass over to you?
Yes. Yeah, thank you, Matthew. And hello, everyone. Thank you for having me on today's call. As Matthew said, we were working quite closely with yourselves, firstly with Anna and now with Matthew, as we look to establish potentially what is the art of the possible on the March to Wisbech line. As Matthew said, it's been something that we've been looking at alongside the Combined Authority for quite a while now. I was part of the team I sort of led the review of the previous, I think it was badged as an FBC, that was submitted to the DFT, and we provided our feedback. And I think following that, the general consensus was that perhaps a heavy rail or conventional rail option was perhaps not the most economically viable, but also probably not the most suitable at this time. So what we've done, and there's been some development into the proposal that we've had and what we've agreed, and I've worked closely with firstly Anna and then Matthew to agree this. We were originally looking at what we would badge as an option selection report, which would normally sit around that outline business case stage. What we then found out through other work which we've done on separate schemes in sort of Fleetwood and Poulton, which have recently been undertaken and have been deemed as best practice by the DFT. We've then decided that, in fact, we need to be taking this back to where it started. So we know it's got a strong strategic case. We understand, the benefits of introducing some form of transport along this line. But the previous work dismissed any kind of light rail hybrid modes potentially too early without having much of a look into them. So what we're doing is we're really taking the options right back to sort of pre-feasibility to actually understand, what is possible, with particularly the new technology that Matthew referenced. You're looking at your light rail, your very light rail, and also we will still be assessing heavy rail or conventional rail, as I said. And then subsequent to that, this will then give us sort of the outcomes of each. So what we as Network Rail aren't doing is we're not going to tell the Combined Authority what you should progress with. We will be giving you a report that details the high-level costings, the sort of benefit cost ratios that sit alongside it, and obviously that's a key part of any business case. And then this can then subsequently be used, however, by the Combined Authority, as Matthew said, potentially within a business case, which we'd be more than happy to support with as well. In terms of timescales, and I appreciate we had these conversations again with Anna probably about a year or so ago, but the work has changed dramatically. I think originally we were looking at a more high level report, looking mainly at heavy rail, and then looking at other modes alongside it. Whereas now, subsequent to this sort of Fleetwood to Polton work that's come out and other studies that have held a lot of weight with the DFT and have gone down very, very positively. We've managed to incorporate the same team who's worked on these, has the experience on these multimodal appraisal documents, and we're now producing this sort of at pace now for the combined authority. So in terms of timescales, we have an initial phase 1 of the report draft due pre-Christmas. Subsequent to that, in kind of March time, we'll have phase 2 and the overall report. Now, I hasten to add the overall report will be just the engineering side of it. And once we have this information, particularly around what the infrastructure interventions are required, we would then be able to undertake our economic analysis, which would give you this kind of coveted BCRs. I think that probably covers everything, Matthew, unless I've missed anything glaringly obvious. I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you, and I will open this out for questions. Just as a very brief point of clarification, given that there are rather a lot of Annas in this sphere, I think you're both referring to Anna Graham at
Correct.
this point,
Sorry.
rather than either myself or the leader of East Cams. So who would like? So we have Nick, we have Chris, we have Neil. Right. So I've got Mayor Nick, I've got Councillor Seaton, I've got Councillor Shayla. I'll start there. Mayor Nick, over to you.
Well, first of all, thank you for attending and coming in to the TIC committee, Rob. I guess on hearing your update, it's a sense of frustration. It's kind of this is seeming to take a very long time. I'm not, however, an expert in the field that you cover, and I appreciate that you have to get the information right and the proper appraisal. But taking into consideration a final report to be available by the 31st of March, and then the follow-up statement you made, and then a financial appraisal. I'm trying to understand what that exactly means and how long will that take before we really know the various options that are available to us as directed by yourselves, and to which we'll be hopefully in the future discussing at this very TIC committee.
Yes, happy to provide some clarity.
What would be useful is if we could take these questions in batches, please. So I'm going to take Nick, then Chris, then Neil, and then if I could ask you to come back on those together. So, Councillor
I'll do my
Seaton,
best
please.
to remember. Yes, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Hello, Rob, and thank you for giving that appraisal that you just presented. A couple of things here, I suppose. You're saying that. I mean, I agree with the mayor. You know, it's been a long time that we've been talking about the Wisbech Rail. Momentum seems to ebb and flow like the tide going in and out. And 1 minute we're looking at solutions, and the next minute it's all been put on the back burner again. But you're saying that heavy rail is not looked as at this time as an option. More, I suppose, light rail or new technology coming in. But what about the future? I mean, if you started with light rail, is there a future option to incorporate heavy rail? Should it work out? And I think I share people's frustrations that we've talked about this and it's been talked about for so long. And are we now going through another series of grip 2s, 3s, 4s, 5s, and 6s, and we'll still be talking about the same thing in another year's time?
Thank you. Councillor Shayla.
Thank you, Chair. I have to say I was quite disappointed in seeing this report. And I think it centers around the strategic objectives. It says increased connectivity, and under that it is Wisbech Rail will increase the connectivity between March and Wisbech. And I think adding Wisbech into a rail network will increase connectivity between Wisbech and the world. It will increase connectivity to Peterborough, to Cambridge, via Peterborough to Edinburgh. It is adding into the network. It's not just about connections between Wisbech and March. And I think that that ambition, it looks like something very short term and stopgap. As Councillor Seaton said, this is about what kind of a network are we building for the future, and that should include, in my opinion, and the people I am in contact with, about freight and getting freight across the country, and you know, a lot of these options don't really look at that in any kind of detail. If we were looking at it from a point of view of, for instance, trams or light rail network within Wisbech and all of those connections, and some kind of a spur that takes that into March, that might be a different way of looking at it. But we're looking at this particular connection, which until actually quite recently was a heavy rail link. And I understand there are problems with the A47 and various bits and pieces, but the idea that we have to solve all of those at once, I think, is also an attempt to narrow the focus. So I was disappointed, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. And I think what you speak to there is very much, I can't remember who it was said earlier in the meeting that we're quite an unusual combined authority because we have that strong rural element, and that issue of rural connectivity is so crucial. So I think it's really important that we're having this discussion and that we are considering the place this has in a wider network. I won't take any more questions at this point because I think you've probably got enough to cover off. We will obviously give people the chance to come back if you miss something, so don't worry. Over to you.
Perfect, thank you. Yes, and I'll do my best to remember the questions in order and the specifics around them. So I believe the first question was around the length of time and when a finalised report, inclusive of everything, can be expected. So the 31st of March, yes, is for the sort of the finalised engineering report. We'd hope for the combined authority to have sight of the report prior to that. You know, we'll be sending out drafts for review. In terms of the economic analysis and how long that will take, we are also looking at doing a lot of this in parallel. So we cannot undertake any of this, particularly around the cost assurance and the actual costing of the potential infrastructure interventions, until we actually know what the interventions will be. So once we know what those are within the engineering, we have a good idea of most of them, we can then begin this costing exercise alongside the rest of the review. How long it really depends on the level of information we'll be getting and when we'll be getting it. But I would be confident that it shouldn't take more than a month after the 31st of March for us to get the rest of the information and a full finalised report. What this finalised report looks like as well, we are in the conversations with Matthew around this. There were talks of it being some kind of strategic outline, a light version of a strategic outline business case, but I'm reluctant to do that because we're not incorporating any of the wider benefits, any of the management case, the commercial cases, all the various dimensions that sit within a business case. This is purely an appraisal form, which will then allow the combined authority to make a decision on what happens next. I don't know if there's any questions on my answer to that one, or would you rather me just to sort of rattle through all of them and we can?
Are there any further questions or comments on that? I know that Tim, you'd like to say something from a combined authority perspective here.
Yes, just regarding the combined authority perspective, but whilst the work is being progressed by NetRail and Matthew around the various options within the options appraisal report, I have challenged mainly Matt, but also others around the other options we could progress in the short term. So while this work continues, we need to look at those innovative solutions. So is it trackless tram? Is it around autonomous pods? What could be delivered in the short term while we allow this development work to happen that might be delivered quicker, sort of quicker time frame and slightly cheaper? So we need to develop that alongside this. So I think what Rob was saying around the parallel process, around what they're doing, in particular on the network rail side, on the various options there, with another parallel track, no pun intended, around the bit around some of those autonomous pods, some of those tractor tram, and basically we need to make sure we can get that done and to progress that in a short term, and in advance of anything that comes here. So I think there's a range of options. So we're saying they don't necessarily have to go through that option appraisal. What can we do in the short term while we wait for this work to be completed?
Councillor Seaton.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Yes, I mean, I agree with that, but I also agree with Councillor Shaler. You know, this is not just transporting residents from Wisbech to March. This is opening a gateway, if you like, to the rail networks. But what is more of a concern is, you know, how are we future-proofing it to make it resilient for the future? So, you know, whether we're starting off with one form, whether it's light rail or trams or whatever that solution may be offered, how is it going to develop in the future? That's what I'm looking for, and I'm sure what the residents of Fenland are looking for. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Matthew or Robert, I don't know if there's anything else you want to just briefly add.
Well, I guess that the question just posed was actually the second question as well, so I'm happy to press on with that answer unless Matthew's got anything he wants to add via the first bit.
No, you go ahead, Rob. I've got something to say just after that. Yeah.
Perfect, thank you. In terms of future proofing, so what we've deliberately done around the modal appraisal is the options we're looking at, none of which preclude any future connectivity onto the main line. So as you mentioned, none of them will stop or mean that a service from Wisbech will only ever be able to get to March. I know previous work's talked around sort of the Ely capacity scheme and what goes on in the main line when we're looking to connect further on to New Peterboroughs and New Cambridges. We're looking at, I guess, in the first instance, how we can get to March. The line's been out of use for 20 plus years and it's in very, very poor condition. And it's probably more semantics rather than our sort of not looking for that further connectivity and that wider issue of sort of connecting Wisbech to the rest of the country rather than just to March. But I think our initial real aim is, you know, how we can first do that piece of connection to March, and then once we get further in there, that's when we look at how we can better connect that sort of first and last mile principle, how we can connect Wisbech, so people that go from Wisbech to March, ensure that timetables are effective so that they can catch very efficiently services, be that heavy rail services or buses from March, however they choose to progress their travel, catch those as efficiently as possible to the various opportunities in the local area or beyond.
Rob, I think I'd like to just briefly come in on that. More statement than a question, really, but clearly this has not progressed speedily, and that has given us the chance to really ensure that we are looking carefully at the options here. And I would just want to be really clear at what we're hearing from the committee here, which is let's make sure we're thinking strategically about this project so that, you know, nobody is necessarily compelling a particular mode. Appreciate that we're looking at options. However, I think what we probably are all in, I'm sensing from the committee that feeling of not putting something in place now that is a short-term option that does not allow us to consider the wider strategic issues too. And I think that's something we'll really want to see as those option appraisals are developed, that we're really thinking strategically here about those long-term pictures and how we connect up this part of our region to the wider network, and however that might be, that we are really thinking about that wider connection. I'm going to need to pull this to a close quite soon. Matthew, you look like you want to come in on something, so I'm going to just bring you in there.
Yeah, it would just back up what Rob said, really. The purpose of this specific report was between Wisbech and March, but of course, that doesn't preclude and it actually fits within the wider strategic piece. That's really, really important for the region and our local communities. And secondly, very quickly, autonomous vehicle, new technology conversations are happening. And as and when we have an update on those, we'll bring those to committee. And we probably have to have further study work done, but it's very cost effective, and we've got some proposals on the back burner, but which I'll go through at full transparent procurement process for that, of course. Thank you.
Thank you. And Rob, I really want to thank you for coming. It's very helpful. I think we probably should do more of this, bringing in other agencies where necessary to talk through the issues directly. It's really very, very useful, and I really appreciate that. And I will take steer from the committee after the meeting about whether we want to have maybe another meeting with you, perhaps with committee members, to ensure that we keep this dialogue going. Before we move on to the next item, I did just want to reflect. This is a very, very long agenda with some very big items on it. We've had some members of the committee have to leave. We are still quorate. I'm very relieved to hear that. But I think we probably have to have a discussion about whether either we need to shorten the agendas or I'm going to have to basically impose time limits on each part of the debate, because we've got a lot here to get through in the time that's set aside, and we're really going to have to think about how we manage that in future. So just a small item to come at the end here. We're at item 11, budget and performance report. Tim Greenwood, our finance manager, I believe, is going to introduce the report. I'm going to ask Tim and everyone else to please be concise in what you say. Tim.
Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon, members. The report provides an update for you on the revenue and capital monitors, including expenditure up to the end of September, and also, as part of the report, Appendix 1 gives you an update on the current status of the medium-term financial plan. Moving to the revenue budget first, broadly similar figures that were reported to your last meeting, an underspend of approximately 1.4 million, mainly down to concessionary fares. Capital budget, again, a couple of schemes that we expect to slip into the next financial year, those being exactly the same as reported to your last meeting. On to the MTFP. This provides the recosted current MTFP. There's no allowance within this appendix for any new items. Those will be discussed and agreed at the CA board at the end of the month.
Thank you. That's very helpful, and it's a very useful clarification on item 5 as well, just to make sure we are talking about the right MTFP at any point. I do have a Councillor Davenport Ray needed to leave, but she has sent me a question that she would like to ask, so I'm going to ask that. Would anyone else like to ask any questions on this item? We have Councillor Sharp. Okay, well, I'll start with Councillor Davenport Ray's question, then I'll pass to you, Councillor Sharp. So her question is, we see declining uptake in concessionary fares. Is it still prudent to budget significant funds in this area in the future? Is our concessionary population cohort increasing fast enough to compensate for the reduction in uptake of concessionary travel? And that may be that's a better question to come from the transport officers, but we'll see how that goes. So Neil, please. Sorry, what am I saying? Not even Councillor Shaler's question. Councillor Sharp, it's been a very long meeting and I haven't had enough coffee. Over to you.
I'll save you time because my question is very similar to, is it on? Yes, it is. To Councillor Davenport Ray's actually. It was really asking about the concessionary fares, whether the underspend or forecast underspend there reflects the take-up, shall we say, of concessionary fares since COVID. Is that the reason for the underspend, that we're budgeting at a level pre-COVID and it's not hit back to that? So it's very similar to Councillor Davenport Ray's question.
Right. Any further questions on this item before I go back to questions there? So who wants to pick up those? I suspect there might be a bit of a mixture here. Tim, do you want to go first?
Yeah, so I think there is partly some of what Councillor Sharp was saying around post-COVID position on concessionary fares. But what I suggest is that that I engage with my concessionary fare leader, and we'll do a briefing note and circulate that to the TIC to outline the budgetary position and expectation for next year, and we will do that in short order.
Thank you, Tim. I don't know if there's anything else you want to add to that. And I think probably there may be validity in a slightly broader discussion about how we encourage increasing confidence in that network among some of our concessionary users. And speaking as someone who, for care and responsibility reasons, still has to mask up, I think some reassurances around what we can do to kind of reassure about safety and ventilation on public transport may be helpful. So it'd be good to widen it to that, I think. Right, if there are no more questions on that, that's for note. We will move on to item 12. Thank you very much, Tim. Thank you for that very thorough report, and sorry you've come at the end of quite a long meeting there. Item 12 is the Transport and Infrastructure Agenda Plan. Does the committee have any comments or requests on the agenda plan? Okay, I'm taking that as noted. Now, item 13. This is really in relation to item 14, which is the air quality bid. If we need to discuss any issues that come up in the exempt appendix, I will need to take the meeting into an exempt session to do that. If we stick to the report, we can stay in public session. What I therefore intend to do is, first of all, to ask Jo Higden, the active travel lead, to introduce the report, for us to ask questions that are in the public sphere. If anybody has questions that need to be in the exempt sphere, then we will then at the end close the meeting down and keep it closed. So I'll cover off everything else about the meeting in public session before I go into exempt session if we need to do that. Is that acceptable to members? I think rather than go into exempt and then come back out again if we need to, I think it will be easier to be a bit cleaner on that. Jo, we're obviously in your hands as to advise if anything looks like it's going into the exempt papers. Feel free to jump in and say no, stop, if anybody starts asking something that needs to go into private session. Jo, over to you.
Thank you very much. And good afternoon, everybody.
Yeah, I'm really struggling to hear you. I don't know if someone. Apparently I can keep my mic on, but has anyone else still got theirs on?
Is that better?
That's much better, thank you.
Okay. So I'm here today to present to you the details of the report on the DEFRA air quality bid that we submitted in September. It was submitted under a very short deadline, which is why it wasn't brought to the committee beforehand, and also to seek approval to accept the bid if we are successful. The focus of the project is in Cambridge City, as this is the largest air quality management area for transport, and that was one of the criteria of the bid. Two sections to the project. The first would be focusing on the school run traffic, with an aim to reducing congestion outside of schools and promoting active travel via an app called Home Run. The second section would be providing bike maintenance and free refurbished bikes to residents on low income. This would be done in partnership with Papworth Trust and utilising their already established OWL bike scheme. It also would be expanding the scheme. So OWL bikes work with people with disabilities. They employ them to refurbish the bikes and thus providing valuable work experience and life skills. So as part of the project, we requested over £164,000 from DEFRA for a 3-year project, and we should know if we're successful in March 24.
Thank you very much. And this is a really exciting item, so I'm glad that you're able to bring this. Again, I have a question that I know Councillor Davenport-Ray was keen to ask on this. Are there any other questions on this item? So I hope this is one it is possible to ask. This is about the location. And Councillor Davenport-Ray's question was why this particular location when there are other air quality zones within the region that have not been selected for this. So what are the reasons for the selection of this particular location?
Thank you. We went with central Cambridge City because they have got their air quality management area specifically for transport. It's the largest, geographically, the largest region with the largest air quality management area, which therefore means that we had more potential to have a higher impact on the overall project. And there was a lot of stats needed to go in to show how much potential we could make. Also, the schools that are selected we haven't selected all the schools yet, but the area works with the schools. There are more schools in a smaller region, so we can focus on certain area. And also Papworth House project currently works there, and so their trial run that they've already done gave us some good figures to show how it works in that region, and then we can roll it out further afield.
Thank you. And you've just answered a follow-up question I was going to raise, which is, I assume that if successful, this would be rolled out to other areas. This is not just a Cambridge-specific and only Cambridge-specific item in the long term.
Yeah, it would be after the.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments on this item? And, Dr. Nick. Right. And I misled committee when I said that there were no more voting items, because of course I've forgotten that because this may go exempt, there's a vote at the end. So I'm happy to propose this. Can I have a seconder, please? I think Councillor Seaton just got in there, thank you. So can I see all those in favour of the recommendations? That is unanimous amongst voting members. Thank you very much. We have one more item to go. It's very short. It's the date of the next meeting. Thank you very much for that, Yo. The date of the next meeting is Wednesday, the 17th of January at 10 a.m. Thank you to all committee members. I'm now going to close the live feed. Can you let us know when that's done?